So night riding on gravel bikes and mountain bikes and even road riding can be super fun if you've got the right equipment. I've been night riding since 1996, mountain biking when I worked at a shop in Los Angeles. And some of the first lights by Nightrider and Light in Motion were groundbreaking lights at the time. But the technology has changed, a lot more companies have gotten into the game, and now it's really hard to decipher what features to look for besides just price or how many lumens. There's a lot more other things that you need to consider if you're going to get into night riding. So today I've assembled 4 units here. 2 units we sell and I think make great night riding lights for riding off-road. And I've got 2 other units that I still have in my demo fleet that have a few flaws that are worth pointing out to kind of help you grasp some of the differences in features that these have. So when assessing a potential model for a purchase, it's really good to give weight to certain features and understand how important some of those features can be out on the trail. For me, I assess probably the first 6 things I look for in the light is the brightness and the shape of the beam. So I want something that's going to be bright enough to make it daylight in front of me so that I don't have to have 2 different lights on the bike if I'm not carrying it. But I need to have something that's got a nice wide beam, potentially a little heavier in the middle where I'm going to be focusing, but enough brightness on the sides where I can actually see where I'm getting ready to go into a corner or get a good field of view. The handlebar mounting system. So if you have something that is a heavy head unit and it's mounted out in front of the handlebar, it tends to bounce a little bit, which can drive you nuts while you're riding. So thinking about the mounting system is important. Now I run a couple of these demo units I loan out for our Wednesday night ride, and I'm often taking the lights off of one bike and putting them on the other. So I'm also thinking about the ease of taking it off a bike in the dark and putting it onto another bike. That's something you may not think about until it's dark and you're doing that, but that also is something that when you're looking at the mounting system is pretty important. The settings that each of these have and the ease of use. Some of these have more complicated settings than the other, and you can find yourself getting confused trying to go through the different settings. Some of them are ultra simple, which is what I prefer. So that's something to think about. And then the cabling system. So as an example, this one's got a fairly big nest of cables, and this one's got a super simple short cabling system. Really easy to connect, really easy to disconnect, and you don't have a lot of extra material cluttering up the cockpit of the bike. The battery mounting and the strap system. If it's going to be a heavy battery and it's hanging on the frame somewhere, you don't want it coming disconnected from the bike or disconnected from the head unit while you're riding at speed in pitch dark. So that's something to think about. A nice sturdy double strap system would be preferred. And then remote operation. Now some of these units come with remotes that plug into the head unit or even are wireless with Bluetooth, which is really cool. And those can be handy if you're going from a section and you start to go into a more technical section and you think, I'd love to have a brighter setting, but you can't take your hand off the handlebar while you're riding over that rough terrain and risk crashing trying to go through the different settings. So I'm going to go through these one by one. We're going to talk about those 6 main features. First, we're going to go over the Magicshine Montier 6500, maximum of 6500 lumens, which is even excessive for most mountain biking, so it's nice to have that extra bang. Retails for $5.99, which is probably a little more expensive than some of the others, but it does have a couple extra features which definitely make it worth it. Number 1, the beam and the brightness, no complaints. So that is a very bright light. It has a solid beam where the center is where the most of the focus is, but it's got a very bright area on the edges, so I can see everything really well at night. So in that department, super solid. The handlebar mount is a permanent mount, so it's not easy to move your light from bike to bike. It also, if you have this and you have a Garmin mount, you've got to mount them far apart so that the light doesn't catch the edge of your Garmin. Also, when you put it out in the front, it has to be very tight to keep the light from bouncing. I don't have any problems with this one, but this is quite a heavy head, and if you don't have this on there really super tight, you will get a little bit of bouncing in the beam that you'll notice it riding at night. As far as the settings and the ease of use on this, on the head unit, you've got one single button, and it goes through a blinking mode, which is the first. The second is a really dim, a little brighter, and then full bangers. So being able to cycle through those settings is very easy. So I have 0 complaints with the settings and the ease of use. It's easy to do while you're in a hurry or if you have to do very quickly and take your hand off the handlebars. The cabling that's a little bit excessive on this one and creates a nest around the top tube. The battery mounting and the straps. Now, the nice long battery with a rubber side that touches the frame to keep the frame from getting scratched or to have it rattling when you're riding. Really long straps, and they've got a little silicone coating on the back of the straps which grips the frame really well. I'm a big fan of the mounting system on this one. Zero complaints. And when you click in the head unit, the cable to it, it has a nice waterproof area around it so it can handle mud and splashes in the puddles. So that's actually a pretty solid little mounting system. And then the remote operation. It comes separate, but you can get a Bluetooth remote operation for this light, which is really handy to use so that you don't have to take your hand off the handlebars, but it is sold as an extra accessory. Now this unit also has a helmet mount. It can be used on the helmet, but something this bright is, in my opinion, way too much light to have on a helmet. I'd probably max out at about 12 or 1300 lumens for a helmet light, but it does have that option. It does come with the mount in the box for the helmet and the extra cable. Second up, we have the Cannabis 4000. Nice bright head unit at 4000. Love the quality of the beams. It's a bright light and retailing for $399. It's also a very good one on the budget for that amount of lumens. As far as the handlebar mounting on this one, it's an out front mount, so you will run into that interference if you're running a Garmin and a light side by side. You got to mount them as far apart as possible so you don't get that interference between the two and the light shining on the screen of your Garmin at night. Also, you've got to make sure that mount is nice and tight so that you don't get the bouncing of the light when you're riding, or also the light creeping down as you go over some rough terrain. As far as the ease of use and the different settings, they've added an extra feature where you can change the color of the LEDs to the warmer LEDs on the side versus two really bright white LEDs in the middle. And on the top, you've got two buttons. Now I'll tell you that it is a little bit confusing, so when we get into the settings and the ease of use on this one, not ideal. I just want to very quickly go from dim to bright to dim to bright and back and forth. And I find that I've had to pull over a couple times and look at my light and hit the buttons and try to figure it out while I'm riding. So it probably has a little added complexity that's not ideal for night riding. As far as the cabling, the simple short cabling system, if you just run it, the battery mounted to the top tube and the light mounted to your handlebar, this is all the cable that you need, and it's really simple, no nesting. It's a very elegant setup. You do have the extra cable if you want to mount it to your helmet or if you want to mount it on a different space on the bike. It does come with the helmet mount, which is nice, but like the last light, probably a little bit excessive in the amount of lumens for a helmet light. The battery mounting and the straps, like the Magicshine, this has two hefty battery straps that have silicone gripper for the frame and rubber that goes up against the frame to keep it from scratching. And it also has a little LED indicator on it to tell you the battery life. It's not visible while you're riding, but it is nice to know before you ride. You can have a little look at the LED and say, yep, fully charged, ready to rock. And then the remote operation. The remote does come with this unit, which is a really cool feature. It's wired, it's not wireless, and it's a pretty solid long cable, easy to mount around a gravel bar or a mountain bike handlebars. But it again also has two buttons, which can be a little bit confusing. But that again is one of my only gripes with that light. Next up in my demo fleet, I have one of these Cateye Volt 6000s. Super, super bright, pretty neat little light, but has a couple things on it that put some of the other features of the other lights in perspective. Now it's a nice light head unit, mounts directly onto the handlebar, which is really nice to keep it from bouncing, but it's that old Cateye system that if you, God forbid, try to take your light on or off of the bike while you're riding, you're destined to lose a couple pieces. But once it's on there and it's set up properly, it does set up nice and snug, doesn't bounce around a lot. It's a really nice lightweight head unit, which I like, but instead of having some of the metal fins for cooling, this uses a fan. A unique feature in the lights, because every time we stop in a group, someone says, I think I hear someone's tire hissing, and we find out that it's the fan on one of our demo lights. It's got a couple different settings from dim to really bright, which is awesome. But this has an interesting system with the battery. It only comes with one strap, so it's a little bit wobbly on the top tube, so we have to add additional straps for stability. And you also have to take off this big head unit in order to charge it. So the cable to connect to the charger is one kind of cord, and then once you muscle this back into the right position, then getting it to connect to this is a completely different connector. So it's a little confusing to use. And it was also, I think the retail on it was $12.99 at the time a couple years ago. So probably a couple features on there, price versus the brightness, and then having a couple different cord systems, probably not ideal. Lastly, we have Moon's TSL 2500. Now, Moon doesn't make this model anymore. They've replaced it with the Cannabis. This was probably our best-selling light out of the last 8 years. And before they replaced it, there was a couple things that are really cool that keep this in the demo fleet for me. Number one, the strapping system. It's got 2 heavy-duty straps, nice lightweight battery, something that you don't see often, which is the LED, which tells you the indicator of your battery life while you're riding. It's visible. That's kind of handy to look down and say, oh, I'm using too much light, I better conserve on the second half of my ride. So that's a pretty neat feature. It's also got rubber that touches the frame, but it also had these little pieces that would fall off in the dark and you would lose them. So that, although really good, still a couple little flaws. The remote system was easy to use, very similar to what the Cannabis has, a wired system with a nice long strap on it, but single button operation, which makes it really simple to go through all the different settings. And the head unit, I do like the head units that mount directly. If they're going to be heavy, they should mount directly on the bar unless you have a really sturdy out front mount. So this was really easy to take on and off the handlebars to move it from bike to bike. That's one reason I keep it in my demo fleet. So the mounting system was pretty solid and easy to twist on and twist off, and the settings were really easy to go through. Really bright 2500 lumens, which for most night riding is completely adequate. Now there are a few accessories and aftermarket things that you can get for your lights that can help make the experience better of using it. Number one, this is what I've got on my gravel bike here. This is a mount that allows you to put your Garmin on the top, and if your light has a Garmin mount or GoPro compatible, you can mount the light on the bottom, and you have the adjustability range to point it exactly where you want it on the trail in front of you. I love this mount. It's nice and sturdy, but when you put a Garmin on it and you put a light on it for heavy-duty mountain biking, sometimes it might be a little bit of weight, too much weight out front, and it's really hard to keep it from jiggling around on you, and you can see that while you're riding the really rough terrain. But a really cool feature. A lot of the new lights come Garmin compatible, so they use the Garmin mounting system, which is really convenient for aftermarket accessories, for second mounts, upside down mounts, and things like that. So this is a really simple one that you can mount as a second bike. Nice rubber mount. You can put the head unit directly on the handlebar and have your around town bike you can use your normal night light for. So that's a pretty cool little feature. Helmet mounts. Now some of these lights do come with helmet mounts, but those are something you can buy extra as well. The quality of the straps. Now remember I mentioned on a couple of these that they had a silicone backer on the strap. Nice, long, wide straps with silicone that really grip to whatever you're strapping it to. So this is a really nice thing to have as an extra piece. And then the carry case. I know some of these lights actually come with a decent carry case, but when you're not using it, you want to tuck it away in the garage, or you're traveling with it, it's nice to have something that's padded that you can tuck away your light in, and it's easy to find everything and easy to keep everything in one spot.